The Witch and the Definitely Dead Detective by Sadie Brent, Chapter 28, Scribbles and Shadows. Evie sat on the stool behind the counter at Silver Sage Naturals, tapping her pen against the notebook in front of her. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the faint flecks of dust swirling in the air. Spinks lay sprawled across the counter, his yellow eyes lazily watching her as she talked. "So," Evie began, setting the pen down and looking at James, who hovered near the tincture shelves. "I went to Hugo's shop yesterday. He got a shipment of old books, and one of them caught my attention. He mentioned that Mabel bought a copy months ago." James' figure flickered slightly, his brows furrowing. "A book on herbology?" "Exactly," Evie said. She pulled the book from her bag and placed it on the counter. "This is the same book. He said it's full of plant lore, uses, properties, everything. If Mabel had this for months, it means she had access to everything she'd need to know about monkshood." James crossed his arms, his form still as he considered this. "It doesn't look good for her," he admitted. "But you've said yourself Mabel isn't the most skilled witch. What if she didn't have the capability to execute something like this?" Evie sighed, resting her chin in her hand. "That's what keeps tripping me up. She's got the knowledge, but does she have the ability?" She hesitated before adding, "I don't know. I need more." James floated closer, his expression grave. "Be careful, Evie. Mabel's a wild card. She loves attention, sure, but don't underestimate her, and don't trust her too easily." "I won't," Evie said softly. She glanced at the clock. "I'm going to pay her a visit. If she's hiding something, I'll figure it out." The Witch's Cauldron sat on the edge of Stony Fork's main square, its windows framed with dark, trailing ivy. Inside, the shop was dimly lit and filled with the faint scent of incense. Shelves overflowed with jars of herbs, crystals, and spell kits, each labeled in Mabel's bold handwriting. Evie stepped inside, glancing around. Mabel was behind the counter, organizing a display of dried sage bundles. She looked up sharply when Evie entered, her eyes narrowing. "Well, well," Mabel said, setting the sage down. "This is a surprise. What brings you here, dear?" Evie hesitated, then smiled, keeping her voice light. "I've been thinking about expanding my product line at Silver Sage, incorporating more plant lore into soaps and lotions, and I thought, who better to ask than you?" Mabel's skeptical gaze softened, replaced by a pleased smile. "Well, isn't that thoughtful of you? I suppose you finally realized there's more to this business than dried lavender and chamomile." "Absolutely," Evie said, stepping closer. "You've always been so knowledgeable, Mabel." "I figured you might have some books or advice to share." Mabel preened at the compliment, her chest puffing slightly. "Of course I do. You've come to the right place." She walked around the counter and gestured for Evie to follow. Mabel led her to a small table near the back of the shop, where a stack of books sat beneath a stained glass lamp. She plucked a green, weathered book from the pile and handed it to Evie. "This one's my favorite," Mabel said. "It's thorough, and the illustrations are lovely. I bought it months ago. It's been invaluable." Evie took the book, her heart racing as she recognized the embossed cover. "Thank you," she said. "I'll take good care of it." Mabel waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. I'm happy to lend it to you. Just ignore my scribbles in the margins. I can't help myself. I always make notes." Evie nodded, slipping the book into her bag. "I appreciate it, Mabel. I'll bring it back soon." "Take your time," Mabel said with a gracious smile. "And if you need help to decipher anything, just let me know." Evie left the Witch's Cauldron feeling equal parts triumph and trepidation. She glanced down the street and spotted the office of Marcellus Simoneau, its polished sign catching the sunlight. On a whim, she crossed the street and stepped inside. Marcellus looked up from his desk as the door opened, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Evie, this is a nice surprise." "I was in the area," Evie said, returning his smile. "Thought I'd drop by and say hi." They chatted for a few minutes, catching up on small-town gossip and the upcoming winter festival. Marcellus was his usual friendly self, his laugh filling the office as they joked about Stony Fork's fierce competition for best holiday decorations. As the conversation lulled, Evie leaned forward slightly. "I heard you were thinking about buying the land near my house a while back." Marcellus hesitated, the easy smile slipping from his face. "Where'd you hear that?" "Just around," Evie said lightly. I was curious. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. I looked into it, he admitted. But the financing didn't work out. It's not something I like to dwell on. Why not? Evie asked, tilting her head. Marcellus hesitated again, then shook his head. It's not important. Besides, it's in the past now. He smiled again, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Anything else you're curious about? Evie let the subject drop, sensing he wouldn't say more. She chatted with him for a few more minutes before leaving, her mind buzzing with questions. Back at the shop, Evie sat at the counter with Mabel's book open in front of her. She flipped through the pages, her eyes skimming the loopy, flourish-filled notes Mabel had written in the margins. Most of the notes were harmless, observations about recipes or minor corrections to the text. Nothing pointed to anything more sinister than an upset stomach. She turned to the section on monkshood, her breath catching as she examined the pages. They were pristine, free of Mabel's characteristic handwriting. Evie frowned, frustration bubbling in her chest. Why would Mabel avoid making notes on one of the most dangerous plants in the book? The answer came moments later, as the light above the counter flickered on, casting long shadows over the pages. Evie's eyes narrowed as she noticed faint indentations on the paper, barely visible in the shifting light. Her heart raced as she grabbed a pencil from the counter and gently rubbed it over the page. Slowly, the indentations revealed themselves, forming tight, square letters. The words sent a chill down her spine. Methods of accidental ingestion or exposure. Beneath the heading was a list of detailed instructions, each more chilling than the last. Evie stared at the writing, her stomach twisting. She flipped to a previous page, then back. It's not Mabel's handwriting, she murmured. She pulled a paper from her desk, a copy of the documents she'd signed during the inheritance, and compared the script to Marcellus's neat, slanted signature. They didn't match. James appeared beside her, his gaze fixed on the page. It's not Marcellus either, he said, his voice low. I don't recognize it. Neither do I, Evie said, her frustration mounting. She closed the book, her mind racing. If it's not Mabel and it's not Marcellus, then who?